Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the NARM Training Institute. The Institute offers NARM practitioner trainings for mental health professionals who are looking for advanced training in complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The NeuroAffective Relational Model is a cutting-edge, innovative approach for resolving CPTSD, addressing attachment, developmental, relational, and intergenerational trauma. I'm your host, Sarah Buino, and I'm delighted to have you join us today. Today's guest is Trilby Kerrigan. Trilby is a member of the Karuk Tribe of California and has been residing in Mendocino County for the past 10 years. She's been working in the helping profession for the past 20 years, and behavioral health is where her heart lies. She's currently working as a medical social worker / behavioral health therapist at Consolidated Tribal Health. So please enjoy my conversation with Trilby. Hello, Trilby. Welcome to Transforming Trauma.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you. We've been trying to connect, and as we just said before we started recording, clearly now is the right time for us to have a conversation.
Right. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Really is.
Well, I think you've listened to this podcast before, right?
Yes.
So you know the drill. So have you thought of what you would like listeners to get out of our conversation today?
I think just really understanding NARM and its application for healing. It's such a great healing tool. I am really amazed with using it and, working with my clients, and healing is possible.
Right. Well, let's start with a little bit more about you and the work that you're doing. So where are you and who are you? Tell everybody all the things.
Right. So my name's Trilby Kerrigan. I'm a mother. I have 5 children. I always talk about my kids because that was the whole reason I went back to college. I never went to college till age 35. And so I started later in life because I just raised my children and worked non-traditional jobs to earn some money, and non-traditional. I ran heavy equipment, I did road construction, a very
Wow.
physical jobs to,
Yeah, labor intensive.
yes, and they paid more, right? And so anyway,
Ew.
I could support my family, and I have a son. He's 28 now, a special needs son, and he really inspired me to go back to college. I could never find the right fit for him. He was getting all kinds of different diagnoses, struggled in school, just the gamut of all kinds of wrong pathways for him. And so I just decided I have to figure out what's going on, and how can I get into a position where I can make some change, and because nobody should have to go through that. And so that started my education path. And so at 35, I went back to school, and it took me 11 years, and I finally got a master's degree in social work from Humboldt State University in 2017.
I'm a social worker too.
Yay! Yeah, I love social work, and so
Mhm.
it's my passion. And right now I'm waiting to take my exam to become an LCSW, and I work at Consolidated Tribal Health Project. I'm Native American from Northern California, from the Karuk Tribe of California.
Can you say that tribe name again?
Karuk.
Karuk.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so my passion really is working in tribal communities, really. We have the highest health disparities, we have lack of services, we have historical traumas, intergenerational trauma, current trauma. And I just felt like, as I worked and went to college and worked in the tribal communities, I felt like that was the missing piece, having a Native professional therapist available.
Right.
So I did it, and now that's what I'm doing, and hopefully I pass my exam and, move forward from there. And then that's how I got into NARM, because that was a training that came across my email from a coworker. But it's funny because Brad was actually one of my instructors in my bachelor's program.
Oh my goodness. That is the
Yes.
coolest thing. Wow.
So I did a AS degree at College of the Redwoods in Eureka in early childhood development. And then I specialized in children with special needs because I thought that would be like a richer program. So then I finished that, and then I went into vocational rehabilitation counseling for a tribal vocational rehabilitation program in Ukiah. And then I did a bachelor's degree in psychology while I was working and then moved into the master's degree. So it's been like a long journey, but I feel like all the pieces came together. Like it really worked how it was supposed to work. I don't think I could have done it when my kids were littler, going to school and working, but it really was meant to be.
Yeah,
And so I work at a local tribal health clinic here in Ukiah, California, and that's been a great experience. I love it there, and I see a long future for me, hopefully.
absolutely. Well, tell us more specifics about what you're working with in terms of the folks that you're seeing. I guess I'm just thinking, obviously, don't tell us too many too many
Right.
details, but what are the general themes that you're seeing of people who are asking for support?
Lots of PTSD,
Mhm.
anxiety disorders. Many do not even realize they have that. They just think it's a
Mhm.
normal, that's who they are.
Right.
A lot of trauma, lot of trauma. And then really looking at historical trauma is a huge part of the work I do with many of my clients. And that's where I really feel kind of like that healing seed starts.
Mhm.
Because really without looking in their own communities and like, why is there so much substance abuse? Why is there domestic violence? Why are kids getting taken away, right? But really tracking all through that, looking at intergenerational trauma, and then how that today, what's happening in the communities, it all plays a big piece.
Right. Well, I'd love to hear how the Native culture, I guess, both from your perspective as a Native person and what you're seeing in the people you work with, what is if there is a collective understanding of the trauma that they have suffered intergenerationally?
Yeah, that's different for everybody.
Mhm.
It's a different process for where everybody's at in that, right? And for me, I can really only speak for myself, right?
Yeah.
And looking at that and I always me just growing up and watching my grandma struggle, watching my mom struggle, watching my, aunts and cousins struggle, and I'm like, "What? Why are we all so struggling?" Or low self-esteem, substance abuse, and I really got to thinking and, it's hundreds of years of genocidal approaches towards natives in this country
Right.
and then the denial of history in our school system only starts when, the Mayflower comes over and all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, here's our history." But in
Right.
reality, there's a whole lot of history before that.
Mhm.
But just like I said, it comes back to my own perspective and seeing all my beautiful relatives and, they're smart, they're just awesome people, but really kinda mean towards themselves, right? Just not feeling like they're worthy of things, and I could never understand that because those are the people I love.
Mm.
And just really exploring that, like, where did that come from and how did we all kind of fall into that pattern of it, right?
Mhm.
You have to look at the whole picture for natives. You have to understand the historical aspects and then the intergenerational and
Mhm.
continued oppression and marginalization that goes on, right? And so it's an awesome time though to be, in Indian countries. There's so much healing and wellness happening right now. It's a huge movement that's occurring across the whole nation. There's like cultural revitalization, language revitalization.
Wow.
It's an amazing time to see and witness.
What's responsible for that revitalization?
I really believe it's just, more access to information, more connectedness, the gatherings and the ceremonies. It's people have information to go to those and connect and get there.
Mm.
That's what I believe. I believe culture and traditions are really on the forefront of wellness for Native people, right? But for all people, if you
Mhm.
really think about that, what are your culture and traditions? What if those were all taken away
Mhm.
and then you came back to them and it'd be like, oh yeah,
Right. Well, it's funny. I've been doing a lot of work around anti-racism for myself. And as a white person, one of the invitations that's been given to me is connect with your pre-colonial culture.
yes,
So I seem to find more Irish traditions than anything else. And that's one of the lineages that I come from. And so I'm really kind of trying to lean into what were pre-colonial Irish folk like? What did they do? What
yes,
were they practicing? And it's been really interesting because as a white person, our cultures have been stripped away for this, like,
yes.
common white identity.
Exactly, and so it's really interesting because we, sometimes we do a little activity with natives or non-natives, it could be mixed group, whatever that looks like, but yeah, where are your people from, right?
Right.
Well, we're from here. Like, well, no, really, where were they from before that, right? 'Cause people talk about, "Oh, my grandparents immigrated from," Italy or they came over from Ireland. And so my mom's Karuk and my dad's Irish. So I have that
Mm.
mix. We have that in common, Sarah.
Yeah, right?
That pre-colonial, pre-everything, if you really look back to that, we all come from, a village. We all have that
Yes.
experience. We
Yes.
all had that where people really cared for one another, really looked out for everybody. Everybody shared because
Mhm.
it was survival, and humanity is really made to care for one another.
Right, and, as we talk about a NARM too, being able to reconnect with our own hearts so that we
Right.
are able to connect more culturally, and that's a hope that I have for what we're leaning into in this moment in history is I think there is really a collective invitation for all of us to have that reconnection.
Right. That deep healing. It is a monumental time, or, so to speak, right? And I
Mhm.
really believe it's because we have access to more information, more readily finding, charting, and knowing where we come from.
Mhm.
And that's a big thing occurring too. People coming back to their tribes and reconnecting and from out in the world.
I'm very curious about your personal experience with that. Has there been anything from your Karuk culture that you've really reconnected to that's been supportive of your healing?
I think because I don't live where my tribe's at, right?
Mhm.
They do a lot of language revitalization, language classes. They have them online. So I've been catching those lately, which has
Very
been really
cool.
good. Family, I've connected with my family. Where I live, it's Pomo territory. So Pomo Indians live here where I'm living now. But even within the context of the tribes here, they've been so welcoming and really embracing my family and supporting us. And one of the tribes lets my daughter dance with them and
Mm.
made her beautiful regalia dress, dancing. And I think just connecting like that culturally and then tapping into the elders' knowledge.
Mm. And that's something that's been really lost in the general American culture is the trust of the elders, right? We put people just like, in a closet when they're of a certain age and you're done, next.
Right. It's very interesting because my grandma, my native grandma, right, she always lived with us all the way till, she finished out her life. And then my other grandma on my dad's side, right, who's non-native, she's very independent. Like there's a retirement home or nursing home. She paid for all that, right? So nobody would have that burden. It was really like important to her to do that, which is fine. I love my grandmas on both sides. But it was such a difference, right? Because it was like, "Well, no, grandma, come live with us," and, "Oh, no, no, I don't wanna do that. I don't wanna burden anybody," and, that was the difference in the cultures, right? So, like, I think we put my grandma in a care home for a little bit, my native grandma, and she was very sick one time. But it
Mm.
was so traumatic, right? Like, we got her right back after, like, 2 weeks or something because it was like, "No." So there's a difference in culture like that, right? Being able to let others care for you or really having to be that, "I'm gonna take care of myself, I can handle it, I don't
Mhm.
need help." But I go visit her all the time. I still visit her.
Mm. And how old is she?
She's 95.
Whoa!
Yes. I love my grandma. She's really sweet. But
Wow.
she likes it, but to me, I feel like, "Oh."
Yeah. Well, one other thing that you mentioned that I was curious about, you mentioned your daughter dancing. And I think one of the things that we've lost in the general American culture is contact with our bodies. And I'm curious if you have anything to say in terms of reconnecting with one's body and healing trauma.
Oh, yeah. So that's a huge piece. I see that in a lot of people, right? It's either they're in their headspace or they're just totally not aware of, their legs tapping and so to
Hmm.
really reconnect all those pieces. And that's what NARM does is really reorganizes to where it's like you can actually physically see people readjusting as you're working through the NARM process.
Can you describe what that looks like? Because I think listeners who haven't had the experience of NARM, they don't know what we're talking about.
Right, right. Oh gosh, I can't even say enough about it. Because I experienced it myself. I went through the process and Brad took me through some questioning, but it was really like all about me. But you get to this place where I got to decide, like, okay, I'm going to connect with this. I'm going
Mm,
to be with this, but you don't even realize it just through the questioning that occurs.
right.
And then it's like you get super clear. Like all of a sudden, you're very clear. Your eyes just really focus and you can actually feel it. So, like, for me, it felt like it started with my eyes, and then my
Mm.
body kind of like got warm, and it really like clicked in where I was connected all the way through to my toes. I mean, it was like pure contentment. You could feel everything just vibing all together. And it was
Mhm.
a beautiful experience because, I have some trauma in my background, and going through the NARM process really allows for whoever's doing the work is doing the work. Like me as the therapist, what does Brad call it? Where you land? You
Mhm.
land the
Kerplunk.
spot, the kerplunk,
Yeah.
you get to that spot where it's just that's it. It's that landing spot. It's just amazing to watch.
Right.
And when I watch people, the same thing happens. Their eyes just get super clear, and it's like they cannot not be connected, regardless if they try to change the topic. It's like they're connected and it's happening, and then it goes through their body. And I've heard so many times after sessions, clients will say, I have never experienced anything like this, and I feel so good. It's
Mhm.
like a life-changing experience. And then once it happens, we'll continue working and seeing each other, but it's like it just builds off on itself.
Mhm.
It brings it back to like, yes, we have all these symptoms, we have all these behaviors that might show up, right, around trauma. And so if you're just treating those symptoms and behaviors, right, it works, it'll work, but you're going to keep treating those.
Yep.
NARM allows for that deeper internal healing, that piece that's been missing for that internalized healing.
Right.
It's all internal, and it's amazing.
Well, and I don't know if you listened to one of the latest podcast episodes that came out, but that was an Inner Circle webinar on working in the present moment. And I love listening to those webinars because I'm hearing things again that I heard, but like maybe it didn't stick quite the same way. And it's just given me this appreciation of how being in the present moment with people helps us to be embodied.
Right.
And anxiety and depression and all of those things are often rooted in either being in the past or being in the future. And when we
Mhm.
call a client to this space right here and right now, it's it's so hard to describe,
Right,
right? But it just shifts everything.
and you can feel it in the room.
Right.
Something opens up. It's like this clarity. It's really amazing.
Mhm. So just for listeners who haven't gone through, if you are in the NARM training, one of the requirements is to do 10 experiential sessions, which essentially is, sort of like having your own therapy sessions, but 10
Right,
times throughout the
right.
process. I actually went out and got a NARM therapist because I knew I needed to do it more than 10 times. But I'm curious, did you have a NARM therapist, or was it really just these 10 experientials that helped you experience your own shift?
My shift happened at the NARM training.
Okay, so Brad showed us that video in the Chicago Cohort,
Mhm.
and I remember how impactful that was for me to witness. So, wow. So literally one time.
'Cause you're practicing too, right, the whole
Right.
time. And then I went with a coworker who's super awesome. She's the one who told me about this training. So, even after the training, we were, like, in our room reading the manual, and, like, we'd be practicing the stuff through the day, and
Mhm.
it'd be like, "Huh, that really works." Because 'Cause I'd be like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna cry," right? Because you tap into those things that you've been disconnecting from for so long, right?
Right.
And even though I've done a lot of work just throughout schooling and my personal life and all that, but there's those little pieces, those crumbs that might come up that you think you've gotten rid of, but
Mm. Right. Not so fast.
right. So the experientials are awesome too because it just reinforced what was going on from before, but then
Mhm.
able like how that was affecting outside relationships in the workplace or
Mhm.
with other people in my life, right? And so it would get me to reinforce this inner healing, but able to look at it without judging myself, like, oh, I shouldn't be this way or that way, but allowing to see, like, oh, yeah, I could see how that is like spilling over to that.
Mhm. Let's get a little more specific if you feel comfortable with this. I remember from watching that example, that was under the trust survival style,
Hmm.
essentially. And
Hmm.
and we talk about, the different survival styles. It's essentially the way that we show up now based on the way that we were hurt as children, right? And the
Right,
hallmark of the trust survival style is fear of showing vulnerability.
right.
I guess I'm curious if you can share maybe even like a little before and after, kind of either a symptom-based description or a behavioral-based description so
Right.
people can see the difference.
So in my workplace, right, there's one person there was something about this person. They would trigger me every time I went around them, right? Like really, I felt really judged by the person, right? Like,
Mhm.
and so every time I would try, every time I'm like, okay, I'm really, because that's the type of person I am. I'm gonna get along with someone no matter what, right? I mean, they're gonna like me, darn it. But I would try every time. And so I'd be like, hey, did you know we changed our charting? This is how you do it. And they would snap back, like, oh, yeah, I knew that last week, right? Or something like that. And it would just trigger me, like, oh my gosh, they must think I'm so dumb. I would like instantly go to this attack myself place, right? And after NARM, I was able to be open. I wouldn't go to that attack place and just be like, okay, and I could just go out throughout my day and just be okay with it. And
Wow.
but it was a huge difference. It was my stuff that was getting in the way of just thinking it was the other person.
Right.
And so to be able to have that inner healing, it's like this sense of freedom that I have from using NARM, practicing NARM, going to the training, and you do learn something new every time. Every time.
Well, what I hear in that specific example is before NARM, you would question yourself and you would judge yourself based on whatever this person's reaction was, which is clearly based on their own trauma history,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There's a power thing happening there. So let's not pretend that this person is completely blameless. That's not
Right.
a nice way to respond to your coworker. But after NARM, I hear you really being able to drop into that trust in yourself and know that's not about me. That's about them.
Right. Yeah. Really connecting to yourself in that heartfelt way.
Mm-hmm.
And I even have like a deeper understanding. Like they always say, oh, you have to love yourself before you can love others. And it's like I fell in love with myself. It was super cute. Like
Oh,
I was so nice to myself after doing NARM. And I
oh,
still am. And I used to not be like that. I would just push through. Yes, I'll do it. Push myself, loan people my last $100, whatever that looked like, right? And now I'm like, no, I'm good. I work hard. I deserve happiness. So
wow.
NARM has changed my life.
Mm. I really relate to that personally too, that all of a sudden being able to love yourself. And for me, I think in the process, I really agency was probably my biggest struggle. I didn't want to step into agency. And the thing that's coming up for me right now was that like, ooh, I might cry. And you've just inspired this. Like being connected to myself was so scary. I was causing the pain. Ooh,
Right.
Trilby, you're helping me go somewhere right now. So yeah, like I was causing my own pain. And so it was hard for me to connect with myself. But when I was
Right.
able to just like go through it and then take that agency and recognize like because I'm doing it, I can also change it. That's where the healing is. Ooh, thank you for that little
Yes.
nugget.
That's awesome. But
Mm,
that's what I'm saying about NARM. See how beautiful it is? Like, and then once you go to that place, you can come back to it, right?
right,
'Cause we get busy and life happens. It's not like I'm perfect, happy go person all the time, right? I get
right,
triggered or whatever that is, and but it's not to the point of where it's harming me because I can go back and
right,
really reconnect with myself. Like once you're little, right, and you learn how to ride your bike, you're not going to put the tricycles back on or the
right.
training wheels.
Oh, what a beautiful analogy. OMG.
It's cute.
Oh my gosh.
It's like once you know it, you know it.
Whoa, that just blew my mind.
You're funny.
You're so right. Wow. New question if we can
Yes.
shift back to your client work because I also really want to hear more about the experiences of Native people and healing through trauma. Are there any success stories that you can share with us? Anything that has been really inspiring to you specifically as you watch people shift into healing?
The biggest success, is when I say, "No, that's all you. You did all that work. That's you." And they just get that sense of they really feel that it was them.
Mm,
That's the biggest success. Like just how you were just a minute ago experiencing that and like and you were
mm,
really aware like, "Oh, yeah, this is me." And so when they can give themselves that credit and that it's really heartfelt, that they really are experiencing that. That's a big success for me.
Well, and when I think about the Native culture and colonialization, how colonialization essentially said you don't belong here. You don't have worth.
Right,
And so how easy it would have been for anyone who identifies as Native American to disconnect from themselves.
right. That's what it is. It's that reconnecting to self that is so amazing. That's the success.
Yeah.
And then when I see people be out in the community, they're doing trainings, with community and doing great things. It's just wonderful.
It is a beautiful ripple effect, isn't it? I have a really big question for you, and I
Sure.
have no idea where we're gonna go with this, but I am curious if you have any ideas of what else you would like to see in terms of healing for Native Americans, and I'm just asking your personal perspective, but what would you like to see change either about the dominant American culture or something you'd like to see change in the Native community around you? Or is there something we need to be doing? Just any musings about how we
Mhm.
continue this work and hopes for what you'd like to see happen.
Right. I would like to see medical providers actually trained in NARM. I think that would be amazing.
Oh, yes. Mhm. Well, they're working on it.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And then healing in tribal communities. Like I said, right now it's a huge moment in history. There's so much healing happening, and tribal health clinics have behavioral health departments. I think this would be an awesome training to
Ooh.
incorporate into the behavioral health departments
Could
the
you
tr at the
imagine?
tribal clinics, just because
Wow.
it's so in line with trauma and the trauma that needs to be healed. And there is a lot of early childhood trauma and, like I said, PTSD.
Mhm. Well, we know traumatize people, so makes sense intergenerationally.
Right. Everyone needs to be healed.
I know.
There's so much healing that can happen. That's a big question because I can only speak for
Right?
myself. But
Right.
for myself and as a behavioral health therapist, as a community trainer, mother with children, I really think NARM is so valuable for the work that I'm doing, and I
Mhm.
know that it makes a difference. So I've been doing behavioral health therapy for 2 years. I'm new to this field. Before the training, I would feel, kind of struggle and like, "Oh, what am I gonna ask them?" I kinda be in my head, right? Like, "Okay, how do I do with that? What am I gonna do with that?" Like, holding all these pieces. And then with NARM, I can really be present and really be in that room, really be centered. The energy is good, supportive, right, as we go through the processes. And that's where I see NARM as this highly effective tool,
Well, one other thing I thought of as you were talking is NARM-informed parenting.
right?
There you go, Brad. There's another training for you, right?
Right.
Because if parents were parenting in this way, oh my goodness, how much
Mhm.
healing could happen. And
Right,
that I think of that as ancestral healing. If
right.
you're parenting in a different way than you were parented, I think that heals the lineage in many ways.
Right, and just the concepts of it, right? The concepts of so we kinda have to back it up, right? And so,
Mhm,
really looking at tribal population and access to services and trusting of those services, right? That's a whole different show in itself. Like I said, a lot of the clients I work with, they don't even understand what is going on from the trauma, right? They're
mhm,
coming in, they're like, "I have really bad anxiety, I can't sleep, the behaviors are happening," but really identifying, right, what trauma is. Like Brad does a really great overview of the nervous system, looking at emotional trauma, physical trauma, generational trauma, right? That might be a really good topic. So, like, even developing a community training that's just around, look, traumatized person is experiencing and happening to them. And then, look, this is a way that can really help heal from that trauma. That would be a good piece to add to it. Some information about the actual what happens under trauma and what physically and mentally is occurring.
mhm. Well, and you talked about trust too, trust in terms of accessing services, and I mean, obviously, there's so much historical stuff that goes into that, but do you have any thoughts about how practitioners begin to build those bridges and invite the client to have more trust?
Right. If your client's showing up, that's awesome, right? They're coming there. They want to
Mhm,
see you. And then to build that trust, having that relationship with the client, right? The client therapist relationship.
mhm.
Native people like to build a relationship before delving into therapy.
Mhm.
Most of my clients, a lot have never have accessed therapy before. They're not quite sure what it's about. They like to really tell you about themselves. Where I work in the clinic, supposed to do a full assessment on clients before, you start working with
1
them
to
and
2 sessions, right?
yes. And so many clients come in, they don't wanna delve into all that right away. They wanna get to know who you are. They wanna let you know who they are. They
Mm.
wanna know what therapy is about. So there might have to be, a little pre-session just to build that trust.
That's an interesting example of white supremacist values being embedded in the mental health system, right? Is this
Exactly.
expectation of, I am the knower of the things, you
Right,
tell me the details, and then I tell you what your diagnosis is, and we go from there. But the way that you're describing this, you're describing a relationship, you're
right,
describing reciprocity. And I really truly think at this point in time in history, all therapists are being asked to have themselves show up more in the room because we're
right.
going through a pandemic too, right? So I hope that we're calling into question this like blank slate and this disconnection and this power dynamic.
And that's what I really, stress to my clients, like, you're the expert on yourself. I'm here to help you guide you through those places where maybe you struggle, right? I always tell them, I don't have the answers, right? We can work
Mhm.
together to develop those answers that you're seeking. A lot of Native clients will tell me, like, I would never tell this to a non Native therapist. And a lot of it has to do with feelings of being oppressed, racism. They just wouldn't feel comfortable. They wouldn't know how that other person would take it.
Right.
So, holding that space, the more trust you can develop in the beginning, the more they're going to be likely to go to those places. I am a newbie here too.
You know, Trilby, there's a wisdom within you that's beyond the school stuff, right? Like we have to get the degrees in order to have the licenses to do the things we want to do. But
Right.
I think those of us who step into this work, there's already something there. And I hear that and feel that with you, that there is an intuitive wisdom that you allow to come forth. And I appreciate hearing about it today, and I'm sure that your clients appreciate being in the room with you.
Yeah.
I love the smile on your face right now.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's that we all have that intuitiveness, right? The things we want to do and human connection, right? And so some go to school, like you said, they learn everything in the books, they do everything, they're perfect. They know all the psychobabble, they are just really great at what they do, right? But it's that connection piece, right? And they teach you in school, even like, I mean, there's certain things you're not supposed to do with your clients, but they really teach you kind of keep yourself really separate from your clients. Like this black and white line needs to be drawn, but that's really like personal stuff people are sharing with you in that space you're holding. And really, I kind of struggle sometimes with those black and white lines and like the
Me too.
assessments. And like you said, like really delving in. I'm going to give you a diagnosis. This is what we're going to work on. And this is my question, I guess, for the universe. How can you really do a diagnosis on someone that you've known for less than, 120 minutes?
Mhm,
And then of course you could rule out whatever that diagnosis
mhm.
is, and I think the assessment process really is necessary, but it can be done in a way that's more personal.
Right, more relational.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm feeling really lovely in this space with you, but we do have to come to an end. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanna share with listeners before we end today?
For those that haven't done a NARM training, I'm telling you it'll be the best days spent, anything out of all
Right?
the trainings that you can do. It's a really phenomenal training. And if you're just starting out with NARM, keep it going because it does work. Trust in yourself in the process. Right now is actually New Year's where I'm from, like for Native Americans, it's our New Year's. And so it's a very sacred time of year and it's really about being with family and giving gifts and celebrating the start of a new year and really starting off renewed, regenerated, reorganized, and being thankful for all our blessings.
Mm,
I had a rough start of the year, but this is such a beautiful, ending here for me with you, Sarah, because
mm.
it was really heartwarming to meet with you and do this.
Same. And what you wanted listeners to get out of this was to have a better understanding of NARM and know that healing is possible. And I think the way that you shared your story and what you've shared about clients, I certainly think you achieved that.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more about our guest, check the show notes or visit us at www.narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma. You can connect with us in many ways. On Instagram, find us under @the NARM Training Institute, on Twitter @NARM Training, and Facebook @NARM Training as well. The NARM Training Institute also offers the Inner Circle, an online self-paced learning program intended for anyone who is interested in joining an international online community focused on healing complex trauma. You can find more information about these trauma-informed learning programs in addition to other resources on the website, www.narmtraining.com. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community and connection with you and changing the world by transforming trauma.